So Chris Chan is back. I mean, I guess she never really went anywhere, but she's like back in the spotlight as far as the internet is concerned. So I'm gonna go ahead and talk about that, but probably not in the way that you think. I don't know. So stick around or don't. It's entirely up to you. I'm also not even going to dog bless this video because honestly, I don't feel right bringing the blessings of dog into this one because we are going to a place that is devoid of love and light and nuance. I'm also going to be using she, her pronouns to refer to Chris in this video, and I'm just going to go ahead and take a page out of ContraPoints' book and just say that I don't know if she's actually trans, and quite frankly, I don't care. I'm not even going to begin to get into that. When I first heard that Chris Chan had been arrested for yet another horrible act, my first impulse was to hit the YouTube search bar faster than something really fast. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say that I didn't do that. That is exactly what I did. I learned about why Chris Chan had been arrested, as well as the person who obtained the information that led to that arrest. And I even found this clip.
A YouTube personality called Chris Chan has just been arrested in Virginia on, of all things, incest charges. Authorities say Chan was having sex with his 79-year-old mother who has dementia. Chris Chan is a biological man, but he identifies as a woman. Reportedly, Virginia authorities initially went along with that. They classified Chris Chan as a female, and that means Chris Chan, who is an accused sex criminal, would have been housed in a women's jail. We understand that decision has been reversed, likely due to public pressure. It became public, unfortunately, for the state of Virginia, and Chan is now being considered a man by the jail.
Yes, our boy Tucker is back, and he is officially tied to some of the internet's most vile, long-running lore. Because of this, part of my motivation for learning more was to, I guess, preemptively tackle the inevitable shitstorm that this was probably going to cause for the trans community. Because Chris Chan, like Jessica Yaniv, perfectly fits that mold of scary transgender predator that conservatives are obsessed with seeking out and platforming for the purpose of furthering their really transphobic agenda. But there are three issues that I ran into coming at it from this angle. Number one, I am still tired from having to dig into transphobic rhetoric for the last video that I made. Two, I really do not want to reinforce this idea that trans people are responsible every single time somebody who falls under the trans umbrella turns out to be a really shitty person or a dangerous person or does something terrible. Trans or not, horrible people exist. The staggering majority of violent offenders are cisgender men, and I don't see them out here feeling compelled to do damage control every single time a cis dude hurts someone. In fact, merely suggesting to many of them that they just acknowledge that pattern and tendency tends to make the whole conversation space a lot worse for everybody else and lead to more conflicts and a whole lot of nothing positive. And the third issue, the biggest one, and the thing that I would like to discuss further today, is that I don't think it was really about that. I mean, there was a thread to be pulled there, yes. I'm not going to pretend that, that wasn't important, that it isn't still important. However, I don't think that that was my primary motivator, and I think I was just telling myself that it was. I think when I sat back to actually consider how I wanted to approach the points that I mentioned a moment ago, it occurred to me that I was kind of looking for excuses to engage with this case further. Put plainly, I was actively seeking reasons to dig further into the already incredibly exploited life of a very troubled person who is in the public eye due to being subjected to over a decade of near constant abuse from total strangers. I was actively seeking reasons to dig more into a case about an abusive, predatory, homophobic racist who had been abusing an elderly disabled woman. All of this to say, I was part of the problem. I was actively contributing to this narrative, and I didn't feel right pretending that that wasn't the case just because I was doing so from behind a keyboard. It made me feel really gross. Not just the information itself, I mean, that's kind of a given, but the fact that I was so compelled to bring it up and discuss it and look into it further. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't to say that we should turn a blind eye to problems or that anybody who experiences morbid curiosity should feel guilty. Again, nuance is important. Our desire to engage with drama and gossip is actually a pretty normal human trait. Evolutionary psychologists have argued that this is sort of a defense mechanism, a way of protecting yourself against potentially dangerous social interactions that may pose a threat to you or your social group, whether that threat is towards your image or your actual physical safety. Now, I tend to take a lot of evolutionary psychology with a grain of salt and recommend that most people do the same. Topic for another day. But I think that there is something to this point. I think that it is part of the reason why drama YouTube and drama streaming is such an effective means of building an audience. Like, don't think it's lost on me that my most popular videos are the ones where I'm discussing problematic figures who have a big following. For content creators especially, it's really easy to fall into a pattern of critiquing public figures and reporting on drama because here's the thing. That's what all of you want. And I'm not pointing fingers here. I already put myself in this category. I was so ready to consume all of the information that I could get my hands on. But I want to ask you the questions that I asked myself when I realized that I was doing this. Why do you do that? And if you do it, is it something that you like about yourself? I mean, maybe you don't care. Maybe you're not bothered by being that kind of person, and that's totally fine. I'm not about to shade you or any of the content creators who talk about this sort of thing. I get it. You got to play the game. You got to give people what they want. But I guess I just want to open a conversation about why we want this. Why do we want this in particular? The more I look into this pattern, the more it looks like, in addition to satiating that morbid curiosity, we are also using people as sort of crash test dummies to assess other people's moral alignment. We are using the problematic, the predatory, and the socially ostracized to assess the quality of an entertainer's character. And I totally understand where this comes from. Like, of course we want to know that the people that we look up to and the people that we follow support and share our values. That makes perfect sense. But this is where the loss of nuance kind of comes into it, because I think that at that point it kind of becomes more about, you know, flying your team colors and taking a stand than it does about what is actually right and what is impacting the world around us in a positive way. Like, is it really about getting information out there to help people, or are we just using tragedy to assess a content creator? You know, like, is that making sense? Am I making sense? I hope I'm making sense. Because when you really kind of peel back the layers, it looks a lot more like tragedy is becoming more about our entertainment, amusement, and how we can kind of engage with each other around it, rather than improving the situation for the people who have been impacted and hurt by that tragedy. It also looks a lot like we're enabling further harm by providing problematic people with negative attention after their efforts for positive attention have failed. And it makes it challenging for us to honestly discuss the situations at play and thus learn from them. Chris Chan is a dangerous, bigoted, predatory person who needs to be kept separate from other people lest she hurt them. Chris Chan is the victim of years of unimaginable abuse and harassment, most of which was committed against her simply because she is cringy. Both of these things can be true at the same time. And personally, I can't help but wonder if the severity of the former situation couldn't have been reduced if the latter wasn't what it was. With or without a morbidly curious audience, there will always be misguided people who cause harm, and dangerous people who victimize others. But I'm going to go ahead and say that the presence of that morbidly curious audience fuels that fire rather than quelling it, and we have to stop framing discussions of drama as anything other than fanning the flames. It's simply indulgent, and by all means, indulge. We all have our vices, but being honest about them gives us more power over them, so maybe we could give that a whirl, I guess. I don't know. ContraPoints already covered anything else that I could discuss on this topic in her video Cringe in far greater detail and just like with better everything. Point is, there's not really much more that I can say that hasn't already been talked about. I just think that as an audience, we need to recognize our power in shaping conversations and shaping attitudes with the media that we consume. And I think as content creators, we have a responsibility to not diminish the severity and the emotional weight of certain topics by using them for engagement. These are human beings, and the perpetrators might be vile in their actions, and that might be important to talk about, but ultimately it is the people that they have victimized who end up suffering because of the commentary that the rest of us engage in. Unless we are correcting or counteracting harm within our own communities that directly impacts us, such as trans people calling out transmedicalism or the survivors of EDs dismantling pro-Ana content, we really need to stop dredging up morbid fascination bait, or at least find a more compassionate, responsible way to talk about it. I can only speak for myself here, so if any of y'all ever notice me falling into that pattern, please approach me about it. Please bring it up. Talk to me. I don't want to contribute to that sort of thing. I really want to focus on concepts and interactions rather than specific individuals. You know, within reason. Needless to say, this video is very much a self-call-out, but I figured that I would throw my thoughts out there on the off chance that it might resonate with some other people. I think that's it. Hopefully I got my point across. I'll see you next time with a palate cleanser, just something that is a little less whatever this was. So, you know. Thanks for watching.